using a Windows Phone in 2024. How usable is Windows Phone today? Let's find out. I recently scored a Nokia Lumia 640 XL for $40 Australian. That's quite cheap considering how expensive modern smartphones are, even in the budget range. This device packs 1 GB of memory, and 8 GB of internal storage, so I will be sure to chuck in a memory card to expand upon the measly storage space. This phone has Windows Mobile 8.1, but can potentially be upgraded to Windows 10, however, when trying to find solutions to upgrade the device, many of them were either too complicated, or the software needed no longer exists, so I really am limited with this nearly 10-year-old phone. Sadly, the status of apps on Windows phones is a pathetic and abysmal state. Most of the built-in apps, aside from camera, radio, Internet Explorer, and some other built-in apps, most of them no longer work, and some work with extremely limited functionality. I guess that's the price you pay when you buy a phone that is no longer made or supported by a big tech giant like Microsoft, but for very basic stuff like browsing the web, I actually found this phone surprisingly usable. You can even watch YouTube on this phone. However, YouTube does not render correctly, so it may impact the experience, and many websites may not load correctly because Internet Explorer is so old and has not been updated in many years, but surprisingly loads most websites. Although I found it very frustrating to use with radio websites, most of them do not play any music when I hit the play button. I am thinking about getting a Windows 10 mobile phone to see if things are any better on a more modern version of Windows Phone. Thankfully, there are some great redeeming qualities of this old phone, including the always-on display. I like this. Even my more modern phones do not have this. Nice touch, Microsoft. I also like the live tiles on the home screen, but there isn't a lot going on anymore since most of the apps no longer work. Even the weather app does not work, which is sad, because I really would have liked to have seen what these apps would have looked like back in the day, and with no easy way to install apps outside the Microsoft Store, I cannot download or use any games or special software that is not already on the phone. Limiting the use cases even further, it seems like Windows 10 phones can have apps sideloaded in a very easy way. So maybe I would have been better off with a Windows 10 phone. I know that no Windows Phone OS gets updates anymore, but their legacy and nostalgia will continue to live on. There is a niche community who still uses these old devices, and some of them have astounding features. For instance, the Nokia Lumia 1020 has a very impressive camera, with 41 megapixels. You can shoot insanely good images with this compact device. There was also the Nokia Lumia 950, which could be hooked up to a monitor to act like a PC, except it could not run full-blown desktop apps. But the idea behind this was definitely futuristic, especially for 2015, and there's a whole list of Nokia Lumias, some of which can still be purchased on aftermarkets today. And if you can find a Windows Phone for real cheap, and it supports modern cellular networks, it might be a great spare phone for calls and texts, and if the camera is good, that's something as well. But aside from extremely basic use cases, I would not recommend buying a Windows Phone, unless you want to start a collection, or you need a dirt cheap smartphone for the bare minimum, and given that the Microsoft Store is shut down on Windows Phone 8 and above, it really does limit your usability. However, this phone's camera is great, and Internet Explorer is still somewhat usable, surprisingly, and it's a robust, reliable cell phone for calls and texts. The battery in this phone is also surprisingly good considering its age. It is in very good condition and I am somewhat regretful I bought this, but in other ways, I am glad I got something really different. Sure, the OS no longer gets updates. The App Store is no longer functional, and most of the built-in apps do not work or have extremely limited functionality, but as a secondary phone, a spare and great camera, and a very basic device for basic stuff such as web browsing, setting alarms, using it as a basic camera, it makes for a great little device that can still serve somewhat useful use cases. But as time goes by, these phones will become less useful, and as older generation networks get phased out, they might become collector's items. I have seen some Windows phones that go for more than $100, and others which are dirt cheap, ranging from $30 to $40. So if you're an avid collector of smartphones, or you need a basic phone for the very basics, then a Windows phone might be worth it. But even old Androids and iPhones provide more useful use cases, only because there is so much more app support for those ecosystems. The Windows Phone was dead well before Microsoft killed it. Nobody saw it as a profitable market, and thus, it had very limited app support. And now that app support is basically non-existent, unless you're prepared to buy a device with Windows 10 Mobile, or flash Windows 10 Mobile on an existing compatible Windows Phone, you won't be able to get any games or apps, which is sad. But thankfully, it's not the end of the world for me. I have so many phones, and I plan on getting more old phones in the future, so stay tuned for more retro videos like this. I may consider a second Lumia 640, or a different Lumia, but I also have some other devices on my list of phones to get. We'll have to see how things go. I will let you know what I decide to get next in a community post. Stay tuned for more great videos like this. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe.